Some say we're dreaming, that we want to get to net zero by 2050. And to that, my friends, I personally want to give a toast. This is for vision. All the airlines, manufacturers, and suppliers are coming together because they know that everyone is stronger than one. Thank you. This is for the largest engineering companies in the world, Boeing, Airbus, Neste, who are rethinking legacy products and betting on a green future. Thank you. This is for the new kids on the block, Joby, Lilium, Hart, Boom, and every other technology startup that was not part of the last airshow, that is dreaming and grinding to build a green future. Thank you. To the generations behind me, aviation has pursued efficiency since the Wright brothers' first flight, and we are racing to build a sustainable future. At Farnborough Airshow 2022, I am full of hope. Despite the fact that airshow displays did not use SAF, despite the fact that golf buggies were not electric, in spite of the fact that we can't go green overnight, I'm still full of hope. Hope because Airbus managed to get over 10 airlines globally to explore truly green SAF via direct air capture. Hope because Neste will grow its SAF output by 15 times in just a year. Hope because Boeing is leading an accelerator at Cambridge University to catalyze green tech. Hope because easyJet is offsetting 100% of its operations today. Hope because Qatar Airways continues to fly one of the youngest fleets in the world. Hope because United Airlines has committed to double the SAF of the rest of the airlines in the world combined. Hope because the World Economic Forum is backing a large cross-industry green alliance. It's called Mission Possible. Take that, Tom Cruise. With this momentum behind us, this is our moment. Let's build this thing together. A net zero future for aviation. In this special episode from the Farnborough Airshow 2022, I asked senior executives in aviation one question. What is the biggest hurdle they believe aviation needs to come over in the next few years to get to net zero? And we will hear from, in the sequence, Akbar from Qatar Airways, followed by Arturo Barreira, Airbus Latin America. Jane Ashton from easyJet follows, and then Jonathan Wood from Neste talks about SAF. Laia Barbara from World Economic Forum then adds to how she's building a coalition. Lauren Riley from United Airlines then talks about their vision. Nicolas Chrétien from Airbus then adds the Airbus perspective. Patrick Baudis from MHI RJ then adds, and finally, Sheila Remes from Boeing sums up what she believes is the biggest hurdle that airlines and aviation needs to overcome to get to net zero. Enjoy this episode.
We in the aviation industry are doing a very poor job of trying to educate the people that aviation is the lowest emitters of CO2 when you look at all the other modes of transportation. If you will notice that during COVID, when cars were stopped from operating, aeroplanes were still operating, and even in a full operation of all the world's airlines, we were emitting 2.5% of, we are responsible for only 2.5% of CO2 emissions. When you calculate cars, or you calculate ships, which use heavy diesel, is far more than the 2.6%. Then when you look at themselves using the electricity, most of the large industrialized countries are still burning fossil fuel. And they are not saying that, you have to switch off the power plants. So I think that we in the aviation industry are doing a very poor job of trying to educate the people that aviation is so important for you, for commerce, for traveling, for your own tourism than trying to restrict its growth by just making it the target of the global warming.
Do you feel then sustainability is a communications problem for the industry rather than a technology problem?
No, the sustainability communication we are already doing, that we want to be neutral growth by 2050. But we are not educating the people. Now let me go back to the electric cars. Now it's become a big fashion that there will be, by 2025, some countries will not allow any more combustion engines. But did they ever calculate that to charge those cars, they need to produce electricity? So though they may have cleaner cities, but they're transferring the pollution to the countryside where the power plants are. Because to generate electricity to charge those cars, if you see how much generation of electricity you require to charge one car, see how much CO2 it emitted and how much CO2 the electricity plant generated, you will see that this is a false economy.
How can airlines, especially in Latin America, ensure sustainable growth?
Yeah, so what we have seen is there's been a huge demand for brand new equipment and with the latest technology and therefore more fuel efficient. So I think that was the first step. And we see, for instance, in the region that the average age of the fleet is below the world average. For an emerging market, that's a lot,
Right.
you know. So on that respect, we see a lot. We see, maybe Latin America was not the region that you would think that is the most advanced and developed in terms of sustainability. But we are seeing a lot of interest from airlines like LATAM, Volaris, Sky, Azul, and so on, about sustainability, about being more efficient, about their interest on the future sustainability, trying to use green bonds and stuff like that, also from a financial perspective.
I understand it's the youngest fleet. That definitely helps. But can more be done to ensure that they go beyond at the newest aircraft with the newest engines, hence lower fuel consumption, but it's still fuel. And growth ultimately will increase emissions in the air, isn't it?
New equipment is going to be 20% lower fuel burn than the previous aircraft technology. But on top of that, we are starting to see, like we saw yesterday, LATAM announcing that they want to join these direct air carbon capture credits for offsetting, emissions. And we are seeing Chile, have a Vuelo Limpio initiative between all the airlines in Chile, and the stakeholders around that, and us, that we announced at VIDAE, partnering to try to develop something. And there is a lot of potential on biofuels in the region. I think sustainable aviation fuels in places like Brazil have a good future there. We think there's potential there. So all that is going to contribute. There is not a single bullet, as the people were saying yesterday, to achieve this net zero by 2050.
Yeah.
We need to go through multiple ways. And I think the airlines are more conscious about these different paths.
So our pathway for the next 15 years or so is fairly clear. So there's levers such as a continuous renewal of our fleet with the Airbus 320 Neo family of aircraft, which will markedly 15% at least more fuel efficient than the aircraft they replace. Ongoing fuel efficiencies, a huge focus on that. A focus on air traffic management improvements. And obviously integration of sustainable aviation fuels into our operations. But in terms of radical technologies, such as hydrogen propulsion, that we will see coming on board really from 2035 onwards. So in terms of challenges, I think we'd all like to see that technology maturing as fast as possible. But we have confidence that will mature. We will need hydrogen-aligned infrastructure at airports. We will need incentives and rewards from a sort of regulatory perspective to allow sufficient green hydrogen to be channeled towards aviation. So those are some of the challenges that we see.
You've often heard about the chicken and egg supply, which comes first, demand or supply, and actually we need to break that cycle. I think we're now starting to do that. Companies are beginning to invest in multi-billion-dollar production facilities and the sourcing of the renewable feedstocks, as well as also in the new technology for future production methods. But this does cost more than our traditional fossil jet fuel, but we need to get out of this cycle of thinking, well, it costs more, therefore I can't have it. If we look at the cost impact on the ticket price of the average passenger, it's no more than a cup of coffee and a croissant at the airport, at least to take 5 or 10% SAF. And by doing that, we start to create the momentum. We're also seeing a lot of corporates, both for air freight and business travel, committing to pay for the emission reduction that SAF, usage of SAF can deliver. And that's helping the airlines overcome the challenge that they obviously have right now of super thin, wafer thin profit margins. So it's government policymakers helping set a minimum level of demand, whether it's with mandates and incentives, plus also then voluntary demand. And I think that will get us moving now, and we're starting to see the investments happen.
And keep increasing that equilibrium,
Exactly.
right? Going up.
That's a great question. Well, I think that policymakers, financial institutions, and industry leaders in general, they do have the opportunity to really make the transition to sustainable aviation a success story if we tackle the three main challenges that the industry is facing. And we should start tackling them now, within this decade, so before 2030. And these challenges are on the demand side of things, bridging the gap, the high cost gap that there is between SAFs and jet fuels, traditional jet fossil fuels. On the supply side of things, we need to de-risk the investments on first-of-a-kind SAF plants and second-of-a-kind even, due to the low TRLs, little experience still, and immature technologies in general. And finally, on the biomass availability, on the feedstock availability, we need to make sure that we have enough sustainable biomass that goes into the aviation sector.
Now, a lot of this is going towards SAF. Do you feel that SAF is the big silver bullet here, or is it going to be a multitude of technologies?
Well, there's no silver bullet, so we need all the different technologies and solutions to come into play. But the one that is available today, the one that is proved, certified, this is sustainable aviation fuels. So that's where we need the financial institutions to put the money on building new SAF plants, while we keep also investing and developing other technology pathways.
Well, the solution that is really going to make a material difference is sustainable aviation fuel, as you know. The challenge is that we don't have enough of it. So this is fundamentally a supply problem, which is rooted in policy. What we need is the right policy levers that can incentivize production quickly. So it's a bit of a supply and it's a bit of a speed issue in terms of accelerating the progress that we need to see within aviation.
It's a hurdle, but probably one that we can overcome altogether. As you know, the climate challenge that we face is not unique to our industry. It's an energy challenge. I'm also, and coming back to your first question, hopeful because we have the technological know-how, so we know what we have to do. But there is a dependency on our ability to achieve this target towards how fast the world can develop a renewable energy ecosystem that supports this transition. That's where I see the biggest, not necessarily hurdle, but biggest challenge. That for a company like Airbus means whereas we've been used to develop products and we're very product-centric, we know how to develop those products. We have to look a little bit beyond and deeper into the value chain, into the energy supply. And I think we've been obviously using cheap and affordable oil. Now we need to go into understanding how we reorganize the full ecosystem to be able to feed that. That's the biggest challenge. And perhaps one of the challenges, how do we develop also our mindset towards greater collaboration and towards, I would say, joining forces in developing an ecosystem that is efficient, obviously, for the world, but also for aviation, and to be able to have people fly safely without harming the planet.
No, absolutely. And collaboration is something that Airbus is leading in. And at the airshow at Farnborough, you basically teamed up with some of the biggest airlines in the world to make a major announcement of airlines doing things together for the climate and not against each other, and that's quite unique, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and I think this is really, I would say, almost a leap of faith that we take as leaders to be willing to take commitments ahead of the market. That's what we're doing by being the first one to actually have released our so-called Scope 3 emissions. So that means the size of the emissions of all of our aircrafts when we deliver them over the next 20 plus years, whether they be flying. That's I would say the leap of faith that we made as well in defining tangible and quantitative targets towards reducing the emissions of our airplanes in their use phase. The first in the industry, we're going to reduce by 46% the emissions of the airplanes by 2035. This is a very tangible commitment, but one that is relying on the efforts of a global community. And we have, as leaders, to take that leap of faith, to jump ahead of the train, if you want, and then to, I would say, get everyone around us. And there are early adopters, and we're glad to see, and that's what we saw also around carbon capture. Negative emissions is a contributing element into the roadmap. Of course, we will need technology. Of course, we will need enhanced traffic management. We will need sustainable aviation fuels, but we will also need negative emissions for what will be left in terms of residual emissions. Yeah. And that's why we also have to take a leadership position on that front.
Yeah, it's not going to be simple because obviously to lift a plane with all that tons of weight, and it needs the right fuel. So there's two things. First, I think, and we produced a paper about 3 or 4 months ago about the roadmap to sustainability, to net zero, actually 2050. And what we saw in this by analyzing, because we were hearing a lot of things, and sometimes some crazy stuff, right? And we wanted to give, because as an ex-OEM, with our OEM, DNA, we wanted to give people a bit of a more realistic view on where we see the aviation going on sustainability. And we came up to the conclusion that in the short term, the only thing that matters and that will really make an effect is SAF, so sustainable aviation fuels. And those SAFs will be needed, and the first hurdle we see is the amount of SAF that we will need for the industry. The good news with SAF is a drop-in fuel, so you can use it as kerosene. It's the same formula. It's just made out of waste, out of different or chemical processes. We were just talking like there's 10, 12, 13, 15 processes to get to SAF, but it doesn't disturb the supply chain. So that is really, really good. The second challenge is that if we just do that, we're still producing carbon in the end in 20, 30 years from now. And I think, I compare it like smoking. If you remember maybe 30, 40 years ago in Ireland, in France, in every bar in the world, you would have said to people, you can't smoke, you will not be able to smoke in those places. 30 years from now, people will say, yeah, you're mad, come on. And it happened. And I think by 2050, net zero will be good, but zero will be good. People will expect zero. To get to zero, the second hurdle we see is the investment that will be needed in new technologies, because we'll need to have a different fuel, whether it is electricity, whether it is hydrogen. I think it will be a mix, and for the first time in aviation, we'll get to see different kind of fuels coexisting. Because for smaller fuels, you can power it with battery electric fuel cells. For larger airplanes, you will probably need burning hydrogen. The great news with those two elements, just to talk about those two, is that they produce no CO2, nothing.
It's just water.
It's just water
from hydrogen.
So, so that's the good news, but it will require a lot of investment from every stakeholder. A lot of funding will be required in this, by the whole industry, and that's the challenge, right? It's at the same time ramping up on the SAF so we can use it right now as quickly as possible and as much as possible, but at the same time investing in side technologies which will become the technologies of the future, and because by 2050 and after that, you will not be able to create carbon. Even if you recapture everything on one side and net you're zero, producing still carbon, I think will be kind of a sin. So we'll have to work on that as well.
Yeah, again, I like the analogy with smoking because we can clearly visualize it, right? It's
a societal move.
Yeah.
It's an industry move. It's not just our industry. So we'll have also to compete with the other industries on this. But there's a real commitment behind, and that's what I like. That's what I see. There's real money coming to that. We're working also with small manufacturers doing those eVTOLs and small air taxis, and these guys will bring some of the technologies. Will work. They sometimes need help in terms of getting this into the aviation world, but there's great stuff coming there.
Really, one of the biggest hurdles is getting all of us together and making sure that we can collaborate and everybody working on the project in the space where they have the innovation and then bringing it to market.
Right.
Bringing it to market in the techno-economic, part of the bringing those solutions forward is going to be a real challenge. Fortunately, it's a creative group of people that are engaged in this and a lot of interest. So I know we'll get there.
Right.
It's just a matter of, getting everybody on board, which is broader than just the people who are working on it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. We hope you liked it and will share it with your network. Please also leave us a review. Awareness is the key to a green future. Your support will help our insights on sustainable aviation reach a wider audience. You can also write to us at podcast@simpliflying.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website, simpliflying.com, and join the movement.